Welcome to the Church of Fire. In this video I want to talk about something that makes us all human. Something that we all experienced and something that we sometimes struggle with. In this video I want to talk about fear. Did you know that Bible tells us 365 times not to be afraid? Very interesting number, right? 365. So pretty much for every day in a year, Bible tells us not to be afraid, not to be fearful, to be courageous. And let me read you some of these verses. Isaiah 41, chapter 41, verse 10. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. 1 John chapter 4 verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. Psalm chapter 34 verse 4. I sought the Lord, and He answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Proverbs chapter 29 verse 25. The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. And the last one I wanted to read, Joshua chapter 1 verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. 365 times Bible tells us not to be afraid, not to have fear. But is it possible? Is it possible for a mere human not to have fear? After all, fear is a part of our human nature. It's a part of our psyche. It's a part of our mental body that was designed intentionally. We have it for a reason. And the reason is to protect our body of flesh. And if you think a little bit about the fear in general, you'll see that there are generally two types of fear. It is that sort of instinctive fear that we have, that situational fear, that's something sudden, where I'm sitting here in the house and all of a sudden there is, what was that? A little bit fear, some weird strange noise. You're walking down dark alley and all of a sudden you see some kind of weird shape that looks like someone and you become fearful. And then there's also the premeditated type of fear. The fear that there isn't really any stressor per se in front of you right now, but there is some stressor coming up in the future. It can be some kind of situation, it can be something as silly as an exam, a test, a public presentation, or might be something serious. You are being deployed to a war zone and you are at the very moment, you are in peace, in the comfort of your own home, but you know that in 2 weeks you will be doing something that will have that fearfulness associated with it. And so now you are sitting and you're ruminating about it, you are premeditating that fear within you, and we all experience that. We call it anxiety. And some people get so consumed by that anxiety that anxiety becomes the definition of their lives. They live anxious. Everything becomes fearful and anxious for these people. driving a car, going to work, meeting new people, being in new uncomfortable situations, something that is outside of that person's comfort zone. And if you look at any situation that is out there, it will fall somewhere along the lines of these two types of fear: instinctive, immediate fear, and that premeditated, long-term fear. For example, something, a sudden movement, some sudden noise would be obviously closer to the instinctive. It will be all the way there, the instinctive fear. And something that is in the future, it would be obviously on the side of the premeditated fear. But at the same time, a situation, for example, like again walking past the dark alley that in a neighborhood that you never been to, well, that is kind of in between the premeditated and instinctive fear, because you are in the moment. You are in the dark alley. You are walking past it. Your life currently is not necessarily in danger because there's really nothing happening to you, but there is a probability, there is a chance, there's a risk that something might just happen because it's the dark alley, it's the neighborhood that you've never been to, or maybe the neighborhood has a bad reputation. You get the point. And now that you have that understanding of these two types of fears, of that spectrum between the two, you can also see the importance of having fear, of fear playing an important role in our lives. We want to have that fear. It's necessary. Why? Well, you see, there's a lot of things that happen whenever you experience that fear. For example, physiologically, we know that there are certain hormones, your adrenal glands, obviously your pituitary gland, I don't want to get into the whole medical field here, which I'm really not that good at. Your pituitary gland sends a signal to adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands, they produce one hormone and then another hormone, and we all know cortisol, the stress hormone, right? And all of these things happen for a reason. Cortisol, for example, it promotes, it sharpens certain senses, certain physiological responses happen in your body. You become more focused, you become faster, your muscles become more tense, ready for response to that stressor, to that threat that you are fearful of. That's why we call it fight or flight response. You're either ready to fight, face the situation head on, or you're ready to get out of there because you know that you're not going to be able to handle it. And we need it. We need it to survive. We needed it back in the day, and we will need it in the future. This is part of our human nature. Nobody wants to be walking along the edge of a tall building and be fearless. You want to have that fear within you. You want to realize the danger of the situation that you are in. So we don't want to get rid of fear. We don't want to necessarily be fearless. We want to experience fear. So why does the Bible tell us 365 times not to be fearful? Well, there are some very, very important reasons for that. You see, whenever it comes to that premeditated fear, Bible tells us not to be fearful because it is silly. It is silly to be fearful of something premeditated. That is a week ahead of us, that is 2 weeks ahead of us, that is 1 month ahead of us. You see, fear has different effects. It can have different effects on us. It can trigger different responses to the situation. To some people, in moderate, healthy amounts, fear can promote more productivity, more focus on the task at hand. For example, if you are preparing to an exam and you're completely fearless and you don't care, okay, well, I have an exam in 2 weeks, I don't care, I'll be fine. Obviously, you might not, in that situation, you might not put as much of the effort that you had to put into to work on that preparation for the exam, right? But at the same time, if you have too much fear, that can sabotage your whole preparation in the first place. If you have a public presentation and you're fearful for the 2 weeks before the presentation, well, you might just not have enough time to concentrate on actually working on creating and making a good presentation. And if you're coming up on stage shaking and scared and fearful, that kind of takes away again from your whole presentation, because you're presenting yourself as a fearful person. And that's one of the reasons why Bible tells us not to be afraid 365 times. It's because it knows that we are merely human. It is our human nature to be afraid. But at the same time, we should have faith and continue doing what we are supposed to do, whatever the future might hold for us. But I think even more so important is in the situations where that have to do with the instinctive fear. And this really what makes us different from the animals. Because whenever the animal responds to some kind of stressor, something that scares the animal, there's really fight or flight response. There's really nothing else. There's nothing else involved. And most of the times, the decision that the animal makes is based on previous experiences. So if a cat encounters a dog and the cat doesn't win the first battle, the next time cat encounters a dog, the response is going to be the flight and not the fight. But with humans it is different. With humans we have something else that is involved in our response to the situation. Now, of course, we can merely be humans and respond to the situation just like animals do, with flesh. We judge the situation by the previous experiences and we run away like cowards. Or we make a dumb decision and we get into the fight. And in both situations we can be completely wrong. But we have something that animals don't have. We have that body of spirit, that breath that God breathed into us, that He didn't give to the animals, that Holy Spirit that we have inside all of us. And that, if we live by faith, if we follow the commandments that are in the Bible, if we listen at least once a day for that one verse that tells us not to be afraid, not to be fearful, then we can let the Spirit guide us in that situation and make the right judgment, whether we want to flight or we want to fight. And at the end of the day, which one is best for us, it doesn't matter. What matters is what's the righteous thing to do. And whenever it comes to standing up to evil, most of the time, the righteous thing to do is standing up to evil and facing it head on, fearless. And think about this. That very last verse that I read, I'm going to read it again, because I think it's very important. Joshua chapter 1 verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I mean, think about this. Just knowing that God is with you wherever you go, and He is. Goodbye, fear. But one word I wanted to especially point out here is the word courageous. What is courage? What does it mean to be courageous? You see, a lot of people believe that courage is the absence of fear. That's wrong. That is not true. Because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is presence of action in spite of presence of fear. You are afraid, but guess what? You're faithful enough to go through with doing what is right, even though you are afraid. That's real courage. And that is exactly what Bible is telling us 365 times.